So this session is just following on from the previous session we had on Tuesday regarding the local council and the areas that we're going to look into this cycle. So a bit of history is that every cycle for the council is going to change. Some cycles it's going to be predominantly focused on approvals and reapprovals because that's the way teams expire. This cycle we only have 9 teams to look at and review. So we're going to put more of our time towards governance and kind of writing documents and kind of structuring stuff so that when teams grow in 2 years' time, the stuff is in place that we don't have to then go, shit, it's gotten too big now, what do we do? So we're trying to put mechanisms in place that Canonical will know in the future that we'll have extra teams requiring CDs. So we're doing a mentoring process. We've already picked 6 teams so far. 5 teams? 5 or 6 teams. So we're going to twin approved LoCo with an unapproved LoCo. So mostly it'll be based on the local councils kind of picking the teams. And with that, then we'll actually pick unapproved teams who either have been there but are active, but also gets to review teams who are just created the teams and have kind of gone off and not done anything. We'll give them a cycle to kind of help them and piggyback them and kind of teach them how to do things. It's not necessarily a case of you've got 4 months to get approved, it's a case of you've got 4 months to learn, ask questions, and then if you want to go getting approved, that's fine, but we'll show you some of the basics like how to organise a conference, how to set up and get more information to your team by running IRC meetings, by doing team reports, by getting information that you know to the rest of your team regarding the Ubuntu community. So this session is going to look at locale versus LoCo on the directory, because the directory, I'm going to keep calling it the directory for a few more days until I get used to the portal, okay, so don't have a freak yet. So the LoCo team portal is set up for countries, not languages. And we need to kind of look at that because at the moment there's an awful lot of language-based teams there that could actually go underneath the country. And the second thing is putting in place mechanisms for teams growth. So the 2 teams that we've looked at are Canada and Australia that could go down the path like the States and be broken up into state or province. And the reason that we're doing it now is because if in a year's time or 2 years' time we've got multiple teams popping up in Canada and Australia, then they're only going to be allowed to have 1 box of CDs or 1 conference pack. But that's obviously not going to suffice. Whereas if we now know that there's going to be a possibility of 14 teams or 12 teams, we know that there's a possibility of 26 new approved teams from those 2 countries, so Canonical can then factor that into their budgets. So it's kind of building in mechanisms in place for the future rather than just going, we now have 14 teams spread across Canada or Australia, but only 1 team gets 250 CDs and 1 conference pack or 1 kind of welcome gift. It's not really fair and it's not really, sustainable, whereas in the States we've broken it down already and that is a fair way to look at things. So the first thing we're going to look at is locale versus LoCo. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about it? Why the reasons for this?
Because it's local team and all locale. It's definitions.
What is a locale team?
Language.
So
Translations.
Translation, yeah. Well,
More like consult. See, this is why it needs to find.
this is why we need to find it. So we have guidelines, and Chris's issue is if we have guidelines, why don't we enforce them? Because if they're not a standard, this is why we need to actually have a discussion about it. Because at present, the map, which we're also possibly getting rid of, is going to go away. So this issue making. So I just want to encourage discussion regarding before a decision is actually made regarding it.
The problem is you can't have a French event makes no sense. You can have a France event, but to have a French event makes no.
What about French translation drive?
That could be hosted by the French team, sure, or by the France team, sure.
Why does it have to be the French team? Lots of people around the world speak French.
And that's the point, is that the Ubuntu FR cannot have people in Vancouver participate in their event.
It could be online. It could be online.
That could be an Correct, but the LoCo team and the LoCo team portal is not set up for, the whole goal behind it is not, that would be more like a bug day, where it's,
The global
everybody
bug.
gets together and works on this package, everybody gets together and works on this translation language.
So what you're saying then is if there was in Poppy's example, a translation into French, you could have the local France team join, the local Swiss team join, and potentially another country that spoke French as their main language.
Yeah.
Correct, but to have a meeting at 8101, whatever road this is.
World Trade Center.
Is actually, well, yeah, 8101 World Center Drive. It's an English event, so does that mean that the UK is going to be participating just because they speak English?
No, and I understand, because the Global Bug Jam, I think, is a very good mapping for that. You've got multiple local teams having local events to participate in an online global
Yeah.
event. It's not meant to advertise the global event.
That's
It's
the
meant
difference. There's a global event which comes from the local council. We create the events, and obviously we have the global jam or release parties. That's fine, but every team then joins that one event, and then they create their events underneath that. But in this case, what's happening is that, I'm sorry, we're just going to keep picking on the French teams. If
Let's
Ubuntu,
go with Esperanto, I really don't care.
whatever team, if they pick an event, it's hard to say that 6 or 7 different countries are actually going to fly up and move to that event because they have to put in a location,
Right.
and we don't have the facility to put online on it. It just doesn't exist. And the idea of the local portal is to have kind of a way to document events happening, whereas if that's an online event, you probably create it via your mailing list and say, everybody join X channel.
And it does now support online events in which the French team can mail the French translation mailing list and say, hey, we're going to all get together online and spend 4 hours working on French translation. And it supports that. But to say, hey, we're going to go to this bar and work on French translation, what does a person in Canada care?
But I'm sorry if if I don't understand that right, but I think there's no more an issue about that. I think that, for instance, for the French team, things are quite clear now that for an online event organized inside the team portal, we will just, handle the event that happened in France. But France, in a large way, which means France in Europe, but also all the islands, which are in the Caribbean and stuff like that, which are also France.
Right, but they should have their own local team.
Why not? They're part of France.
Because they're not going to an event that you have.
What about Hawaii?
They have their own local.
Yeah, because the United States is split between states.
But aren't they their own country? They're just a French country?
No,
No, it's France.
they're France.
It's
Yeah, but they're an island.
Then you can have them.
That's,
I honestly don't care how they do, but
yeah.
Well, actually, no,
that's-
Chris, having that attitude of don't care isn't the issue. The idea of this discussion is to have a do care attitude, so we need to try and figure it out for everybody.
I'm saying that
Yeah.
with that, but let's go with the Esperanto team. The Esperanto
Yeah,
team is purely language.
that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that for the French team, it's not an issue that we have clearly with all the discussion that happened. We have clearly understood that we need to focus on the event that happened in France.
Right.
But I just wanted to say that France has some part in many continents. That's what I wanted to say.
We could do that as the way that we want to do Canada, where consider them to be their own province or something. I mean, there can
We'll
be.
figure out.
Correct.
Yeah, but
And France has come a long way. It's just that France was the big one that
yeah.
was the initial.
Yeah, sure. I really think that the issue right now is how do we handle local, not local teams, but language teams.
Right.
So maybe the answer will be the team portal is not aimed to do that.
That's exactly what the answer is, but we're trying to define.
So maybe we have to wonder all together how can we address that? Not necessarily on the local, on the team portal, but because currently there's no, I would say, reconnaissance, or there's no definition, or there's no nothing known as a language team. And this is something. This is something that we are going to face with Esperanto, but for Spanish, for everything.
There's translation teams. That's what a language.
That's not the same thing. Because the translation teams are part of a local teams usually.
Okay.
So
but then that's so the argument there is that should a language LoCo team be displayed on the LoCo portal?
I'm not related to the local portal here. I'm just saying that in a general manner of speaking, how do we handle in the Ubuntu community? How do we handle language team? Do we create something for that? Don't we? I mean, this is a way to gather support, online support.
I think that would. One, I believe it falls outside of the realm of the LC because it's not a local team, which is what the LC does. I think that can be done language by language. I don't know the answer, and it's hard for me to. I have trouble looking through other people's eyes because I speak English. Ubuntu is English. What you guys and why you guys different languages.
That's it. That's the point. I mean, when you go to RLC, if you're looking for some help, you will clearly go to Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are French speaking, you will go to Ubuntu -FR.
Right.
If you're Spanish speaking, you go to Ubuntu -ES, and so on. So, how do we consider? Do we do something for that or not? Because this is something that I think is really important. Do we help? Do we create? I would say a status for that. Not on the team portal. I agree clearly. It's not the point right now.
Right.
But to help this team to organize, do we create? I would say an existence. Do we?
So it doesn't come under the local council, as far as I can see.
So clearly, maybe this is something that we need to address.
Work with David Planella, maybe.
Maybe, clearly.
Do you have a point to make?
Yeah, well, I kind of had DS Castle brought up something that I think is very relevant. It says, are we letting the LTP dictate the shape of the community? And I think maybe when we talk about language, that's just one thing that people may group themselves with people around the world about is the language, but there might be ethnicity or there might be other ways that
Where does
people
it stop? Religion.
Well,
Do we allow religious-based local teams?
Well, my point is that there's many ways that people identify themselves, and the languages that they speak is just one way. And those ways that they identify themselves can mean that they have specific needs as a person in the Ubuntu community. And if there's enough people around the world around this identifier to create a group to address those needs, whether it be a language barrier, a cultural barrier, your heritage of whatever sort, or a gender barrier. If there's a group around the world willing to meet those needs, should we not provide them, all the same resources to meet those needs in the community?
The local team portal isn't set up for that. If someone wants to make something, by all means, and I'll help you out.
Right.
Wait,
well,
what-
maybe we need to.
Okay, so what I would like to see happening is that on the local team portal, say we click on the Spanish team page, right? That it could possibly list all the language-based teams that subscribe to that. So there would be possibly free fields, so that if you're interested in Esperanto or Catalan or whatever, you could join those teams. So the team pages for those languages are under the LoCo team page. And that will be a way of kind of meeting everybody halfway without telling people there is no language-specific tool for you and kicking them off the LoCo team portal. I would rather integrate it in some kind of meet people halfway.
I just do it through tags.
So I think it would be a good way to kind of integrate it a little bit, Chris, because we can't just tell people there's 10, 15 language-based teams, goodbye, good luck, we don't want you. Because that's not true. Because many of them, it's a big factor in their LoCo team.
So do these language-based teams, is the problem that they don't ever have events?
No, they
So they
do mostly translation work, or they do it and they just want to be part of a language-based team.
Because I think, the LoCo portal, it seems like that should be, I think we really do need to say it's location-based and it's for planning events, because the whole thing is written around planning events and everything, so I think...
But we're also adding blog posts, Twitter posts, photographs.
And those are all about events and outreach and advocacy.
Okay.
So, if there is a language team that's doing events, I think it's perfectly fine that they're there, but a LoCo team really is a thing where people get together.
We talked about forking the LoCo team portal into a global team portal, being anything that has a launchpad team.
So I think
I need someone to create
Hello?
a program.
Do you have a comment to make?
Yes. In my opinion, here we are addressing two big problems. The first one is to start to realize that for the teams, the communities not speaking English, they haven't the proper guidelines to form a team.
Right.
Because we are sorry, but we are simply oversimplifying the language barrier. We are saying just translation. Being a local, non-English local doesn't mean just doing translation. Doesn't mean have a proper website. That means have activities to encourage people to participate in your language. This means.
But that's a local.
So these are.
That's a local team, not a local team.
Now, the problem here in this topic is just the local directory. So in my opinion, we just need to fix the local directory so that the events are the main focus of the web page, so that you can show me the events close by my area, also if they speak another language, because there are many countries speaking several languages, so we just need where is the more convenient event so that I can drive 1 hour and meet other Ubuntu.
That's all already there.
Yeah, but
We
now,
are not location aware, as in I don't know where
if you
live.
open the Ubuntu, the local directory, now you see the word, you pick the word, and you go on themes. You should click on in area of the word and go to the events, not to the themes.
Okay.
Then,
It's
if I
about
want to join a
finding a
team,
local team.
you can show me per language and per location.
Okay, well,
But
That-
I think
that is
how
good.
is the navigation in local portal at the moment?
What's the
It's-
problem with trying to solve?
so
Sorry,
Local versus locale teams.
why does it need to be reversed?
Because locale teams are not supported by the LoCo team portal.
In what way?
It's not possible to have, the LoCo team portal is set up for events, mainly physical events.
Geographic events, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So locale teams being in the LoCo team portal don't really fit the,
they will also always
The
appear
design of the
unapproved
portal.
because they don't go through approval
And-
signs.
There could be what, sorry?
They'll always appear sort of unapproved as well, so it kind of skews the results. If you're looking at the local team portal, you'll see a list of approved teams and unapproved teams, but we don't govern or go through statuses like
Why
that.
can't locale teams have events? That's the thing I don't understand. Like if there's a Ubuntu French team, I suppose a France team is an example. And, there's a French club in San Francisco, they want to get together and talk about Ubuntu. I mean,
that would be under the California local team.
why can't it be part of the French team, is my question.
Because it's a France team, not a French team.
What if the members?
Sorry, John, what I'm getting at is, it sounds to me like this is a problem we're imposing on ourselves. It seems to me like the whole point of the LoCo directory is to provide a means in which you can find out about Ubuntu advocacy groups, find one that attracts you and interests you, and participate in events. And typically, it's been oriented around people in my local area, which I think is obviously the vast majority of events. But it seems reasonable to me that if there is a Spanish group or a French group or
Okay,
whatever.
well, let's go with Esperanto.
Right,
You subscribe to the Esperanto team,
okay.
and there may very well never be a team or a meeting or an event in your area.
That's fine.
Which not to say you can't create one, but
Well, what's
if
wrong?
if I'm going to look for events, I want to find events that are near me. I don't want to see teams that are
I know,
happening.
but all I'm saying is that, appreciate the fact that the geographically oriented events are useful, but in California, I see events that happen in Los Angeles, 6 hours away from me.
Right, and that was why people want city teams.
Right, but what I'm saying is I don't think it's necessarily a problem. I mean, it could be, I don't think anyone would deny that it would be optimized if it behaved in that way if it was in a certain radius of way over. But like you said, Chris, the local directory is not geographic, it's not location based. But it seems reasonable to me that if there's a French locale team and they just want to get together and talk about being French, speaking French, I don't see what the problem is.
And I mean, there's some other examples that I thought of when you said that let's say we had 12 members of the French LoCo team here and they decided to schedule a French LoCo event at UDS that they wanted everybody that was part of the French team, because maybe there's 3 people from Paris and 2 from Marseille and they don't see each other, and they want to advertise that to their LoCo. If we impose that restriction, they're not going to be able to potentially do that.
No,
But
but
they are,
it
we
would
just
still,
picking a
it would
venue.
still be a French, Florida had a perfect example. Chris created an event for last night, and we emailed, did you email, it went on the UDS.com website.
And
That's how
UDS
people found
announced
out.
it.
That's how it should work. And they could either use the French team or the Florida team for that event. It doesn't
Why-
really
why-
matter.
you're saying that's
And you
how-
just email everybody else.
You're saying that's how it should be. But if in the example that Charles was giving, there's a whole bunch of people who've flown in from France, they want to get together. They're not actually particularly interested in going out with the local LoCo team. They want to get together because they never get together because France is big.
Right.
So while they're here, they want to get together, go to a really nice French restaurant, and have a nice time.
So they
That's
created
nothing to
created
do
an
with the
event
Florida
under-
LoCo.
They created an event under the French team and say anybody from France who's at UDS
Yeah.
can come to this event.
Now, take it another step though. Let's say all of the French-speaking people from 4 different countries want to get together at UDS.
It's the same thing as the Florida event where we created an event and emailed or published it to anybody who would care.
Well, it's a bit different in that
Who was
case.
like,
So, say I'm Irish, I want to create an event, so I'm here, I'm in UDS, and I want to create an event, I want to go shopping. Where do I create the event? Which team?
It depends on what you're looking for to get out of it.
I think
Are you looking for
So
absolutely
the reason
anybody or
this,
specific?
the reason this discussion is actually happening is because the developers keep bringing it to the local council. So the reason it's at the session this week is just to finally air it out once and for all and to make, because I'm sick of hearing this every 6 months going, there's local language teams on it, and I just have it up to here.
Speaking of my one opinion, I don't see the problem.
Could we-
Well, so
Well,
I think
okay,
we should,
Here's my main reason for this being a concern.
Don't rush.
Okay. When bugs are created and I don't touch them or the other developers don't touch them, because everyone has to admit that to a certain extent, I have to be interested in the bug for me to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I have been accused of not caring about this, or not caring about teams, or not caring about certain types of people, or having prejudice because I will not, because I haven't wanted to. By all means, I do work on bugs that I don't necessarily agree with or don't have an interest in. But if I decide that this is not a bug that I want to work on, and then to turn around and get accused of not caring about language-based teams, and that's why it doesn't happen, and yes, that has happened.
Can we solve the issue though by potentially trying to take an action item with the people that speak Spanish and the people that speak French to try to help you get developers that have that interest? So now it's not on your shoulders, we've spread it,
We've been trying
device,
for
the
years
tool
to
has
get
used for
developers, we
everybody.
haven't got a single
Okay, so
one.
Liz has a point here to make?
so I think the question here is the LoCo team portal a LoCo thing or an event thing? Because if it's an event planner thing, then by all means, bring in language teams, bring in
Well, and like I
Launchpad,
said,
people who want to get together, bring in everyone. I mean,
one of the
language,
things that we want to do is fork it to include all teams. Go to global.ubuntu.com or something, and any team that's on Launchpad can create online events, physical events, whatever they want. But the local team portal specifically is location-based.
So there's a compromise, as I've said, on the LoCo team page. So Spanish team, for example, could we put a list of all the Spanish locale teams on it?
There is a bug to group teams based upon languages, and languages is a selectable feature, and a team can select multiple languages.
It seems to me that from what you're saying, it seems like, I bet you're based upon not full information, but it seems like much of the infrastructure available at loco.ubuntu.com supports the ability for us to have locale teams and those teams to organize events. It sounds like what we're really talking about is not so much an infrastructure issue, it's more of a policy issue.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I completely agree with you, Chris. Like you should, if you're a volunteer, you should fix the bugs that interest you.
Right.
If you don't
But then to be accused of not
Right.
caring about something.
And the people who accuse malintent are assholes, right?
I agree.
It's completely inappropriate to say that just because you don't want to work on a bug, that there's some kind of, it reflects badly on you. Everyone's a volunteer. But it strikes me that it's not like this is I can understand your reservation if it was a big extra chunk of work that you weren't personally interested in, and people wanted you to do that work, but it sounds like much of the infrastructure already serves it. And what would worry me a little bit is if we already have this infrastructure to support locale teams, there's an interest in locale teams forming and maybe organising little events here and there, like I said, like some of the examples. Yeah, then I'd say just live and let live. I mean, and these are relative edge cases, it sounds like. I mean, most of the locals...
It's not going to happen that much, and that's why I think grouping them underneath their main LoCo would actually resolve all of this. But it's because if you look at the local.ubuntu.com and you see approved teams and unapproved teams, you're seeing a lot of language-based teams there, and it kind of skews the results as well.
it's also confusing if you click on Ubuntu ES, and
Yes.
you don't know whether that's
Right,
Spanish.
and that's a big part of it, is
Yeah.
that
It's
was
very
the other half of this whole thing, was unifying the naming convention.
But we have that resolved.
Which we have a fix for.
So is there just from a display perspective, is there a means in which, in terms of loco.ubuntu.com, is there a means in which you could basically say, like, just have a separate section if these are the language things? Like, you could just separate them out. I'm just wondering, it sounds like
Possibility? Is it possible? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then the problem is, someone's going to have to go in here and the Esperanto team is a language-based team. There's no country that has Esperanto as an official language. So someone's going to have to, first it's going to have to be approved in the LoCo team's team on Launchpad. Then someone's going to have to come in here, hit some sort of flag that says this is a language team only. Then it's going to go somewhere else, presumably at the bottom of the page. Then they're going to say, well, why are we at the bottom of the page?
Wouldn't you just make that team a member of, instead of local teams, would be a member of locale teams? It's just a different Launchpad team.
We would have to rewrite local directory to support another team.
Do you think that would be, I mean, again,
We're just trying to air this discussion out because I think it's better that we air it out today here where we're all face to face, and it's much easier than over IRC, to be honest.
no, I agree. I mean, it seems like in terms of, if we were to separate out the teams, so imagine you have that page, you've got the geographical locations, which works really well for most of the pretty much all the teams, right? The problem is, of course, that the French team has this French-speaking areas all over the world, right? So it doesn't neatly fit into those continents. So maybe at the bottom it just says language teams. So these are teams where you can talk to people, that you can share an interest with other Ubuntu users who are interested in language as opposed to geographical region.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that there's two options. One is to either rewrite that page to support sucking in teams from a locale teams Launchpad group.
It's more than just that page.
Right. Or you could, the other option is that you actually have the existing infrastructure, but then you've got to manually go in each time a new team's formed.
That would actually be the easier thing, except for then the LoCo teams, and this is the LC's decision, I guess, has a whole bunch of teams that aren't local teams. Daniel?
I'm very much in favor of living that day. If people want to have these events, we should really think hard about how we can assist them
Yeah.
do it.
So,
I have an idea. I don't think it's necessary to have local teams with local team leader and all the other stuff. So why don't we just offer to set up events that are not based on a team or something, but just list them elsewhere, or I don't know. Could we get from Launchpad if the user or the user's languages, so it would also show up and say, look, you speak English and Spanish and German, and here's events for you. For example, so we don't need this additional team structure and all the rest of it, because there's loads of things we could use this for. If German-speaking folks from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, if they come together on ISE to have an event there. Okay.
are you coming back as one of our developers?
No, I'm just saying, I don't think we need to think so hard about what do we do with all these teams and how much do we need to
Here's my other problem though, is, this is, like I said, still my ultimate goal, is I would love to have a global, say the release team comes to us and say, well, we want to be on the LoCo directory too. Well, if we're going to allow language teams, we might as well, so to extend it out to have a separate global, anyone can do whatever they want, would be.
That's getting a bit ahead of ourselves, to be
Right,
honest.
I think that's a slippery slope. I think there's a very specific challenge to be solved around locality. There's not many of them. I'd say we just look at the least amount of work necessary to just split them out a little bit and let those
Exactly.
people organise events. And if it's just a checkbox thing, if you just had a field in the local directory that basically says this is a locality, and just shove it on the page, and those people can organise teams, I'd say, I think we're all spending more time on this than this.
Yeah, I think that would actually make our lives all a lot easier, and we've actually finally reached a decision, which,
But to go with, when we have bugs raised that are referenced to locale teams, and I just,
But they're just, how are they going to be any different? I mean, with the exception of, I mean, the events are all going to be the same, right? I mean, you'll select a venue, you'll put the details in. It'll be, the relationship will be built with the locale thing. Yes, you could argue that, well, if an event's happening in San Francisco, it could be part of the Ubuntu English team as well as the accountment thing. But I'd say for now, that's not that big of a deal. But
okay, so.
I'd say just, dude, I mean, you're not interested in locale teams, that's completely reasonable. Just shove that little flag in there, it solves the problem, then we can move on.
And the other thing is that we're going to have to figure out how to untie them from countries, otherwise it's going to appear on that page 18 times.
Right, so, sure, isn't it just if you've got that
We
local
probably
bit
could
set,
figure
it
it out.
just excludes it from that list?
We probably.
That would be my suggestion. I'd say that, like, because there's so few of these teams, these local teams, and if we, from what I can tell, there is actually a sense of team spirit within those local teams, right? It's not as simple as, like,
I assume there is.
I get the impression that the Ubuntu French team or the Ubuntu Esperanto team are actually a team, like, there's actually discussion and whatever else, so.
I assume. But then the other thing is, like I hate to pick on the French team, but they will have to decide which do they want to be.
Wasn't there two teams, the Ubuntu France team?
No, it's Ubuntu FR, and that's the team.
Oh, well, yeah, I agree with that
And
too. But
that's,
they could be both, right? I mean, you could have the Ubuntu FR and the Ubuntu FR-FR.
right, but that's something that they have to decide how they want to do it. If they want to have a local team and a locale team, I guess if we're going to do this, that's easy enough. They just have to be separate, otherwise.
But that's how you've done your work, right? You've already fixed the logo, right?
I
But
don't
I
know.
mean, we're speaking for Ubuntu France, but we have the same thing for Ubuntu Spain.
Right.
I mean,
So-
that's just an, I mean,
Right. Except, does Spain try to build themselves as the Spanish team?
yeah,
Or do they build themselves as the Spain team?
Spain team.
So that it's
Spain
different.
team, but you also have,
If they
I
want
would
to
say-
make a Spanish team, they can.
there is a kind of Spanish team, if I remember clearly. For instance, I don't know if it was for Dev Week or I don't know which week it was, but where the Spanish team has been doing some translations simultaneously. We did that also for the French-speaking people. So I think that if we start to have, I would say, if we start to have the ability to gather teams on the language speaking criteria, it will help such a possibility.
I'm not completely sure that I understand.
Okay. If we have the ability on the local team, on the team portals, to say, for instance, I will say the Belgian team, they say, okay, we are partly French speaking. So they will appear on the Ubuntu French team, not Ubuntu France.
To be a child team of the language team.
Yeah. Or Ubuntu Luxembourg. Or
I guess in locale teams there could be a way to assign, like with Belgium.
On another page, for instance, we can list the various language speaking by the different teams.
Correct. So the locale team can look for all the teams that have Spanish checked as their
Exactly.
And the Ubuntu Spanish locale team can list all of those
Yes.
local teams.
Exactly. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just finishing my idea, and if we are able to do that, we will be able to contact. For instance, if I want to have a huge event online in French, I will be able to contact all the team contacts or team leaders from that teams, which have themselves marked, which have by themselves speaking Spanish or speaking the language I want to organize the event, and to say, okay, why don't we gather to do that event now?
Well, there is somewhat the ability in the back end, it's just not been fully implemented, to have multiple teams participate in one event. So it could be that a locale, the French locale team can make a French event and list the France team and any other team that speaks France as part of that event, and then it could show up on all the pages.
Yeah, but I think it could be way easier, because you were speaking right now on when I organized the event. So I think we could do something that would be really interesting on that point.
It could be really
But
cool. The problem
I
is,
agree like this. The problem is we need to find, for instance, developers who want to do that. And I'm clearly not blaming you to not do that, because it's not the thing that you have to do. You want to do. I mean,
I don't accuse anyone in here, but there have been on IRC, mostly in private messages or emails, things where I don't care about other people or whatever, and
you don't care about
Okay,
people. We
I'm
know
just
that.
conscious that we've got about 10 minutes left and we still have one more topic to discuss. So are we okay to add?
he has.
Yeah, Paolo Lopezia.
Okay.
The thing is that it's not an easy task to analyze, because languages and countries overlap in many ways. We have many countries speaking different languages, and also the people being languages. So all you try to analyze a very complex criteria as it was trying to figure out. So you can have also language and countries. Or if you want to live happy, just show who's around me. That's all.
That's not living happy for us.
Why? You're already doing it with the hands. So just have a sort of geolocalization of the team.
We don't
just
have-
show who's around me.
We don't have any sort of location awareness or anything like that.
Okay.
That would have to be-
Just ask for coordinates.
Right, that's why I said that's not happy for us, because of the amount of work that would take. Yes, that's a
Yeah,
great
but
idea.
restructuring all the entities to have this sort of relation, language and country, in my opinion, is way more difficult than just showing the things around you.
No, because we don't have any way of knowing where you are.
Well, you can ask the contact to fill the coordinates, that's all, 5 seconds. And
For the
then-
team or for?
For the team and for the events.
Well, the
Just
teams
show
are
what's
country.
around you.
Where does an Esperanto team exist?
Sorry?
Where do they exist?
Okay, Esperanto is a very, and it is one exception. We can put in, we have to treat it like an exception, but there are other teams, like we were talking about Spain, there is the Catalan team. Okay, so Catalan is a language and it's also a community, a local community. So Catalan team can organize events and people from Spanish team can be interested because they speak both languages. So the thing is, the events is in Barcelona or is in Madrid. See, if it's in Barcelona, I would be interested. What if it's the French immigrants that are organizing it? So I think for you guys writing this portal, it may be easy just to show the position.
I think the location stuff would be more useful further down the line if we had a vast number of very small teams, like in cities or in regions or provinces where you're in a, like for example in the UK, if I was in a county and I wanted to know what was going on in the counties around me, but for an entire country, to know what's going on in another country, it could be 500 miles across your country and then 500 miles across their country.
I think he's saying if you're in one corner of the country, know what's happening in the country right next to you.
It's fine. I don't think it's really possible at present, and unfortunately we don't have a manpower in the developer side of things.
Right.
If we were to get 20 new Python developers, we could look at having these implementations.
There's also the fact that a lot of people are unhappy with giving information about them.
Exactly. So I don't think, unfortunately, at present. I am really content that we have 5 minutes left and we still have the other topic to discuss.
Good luck.
The local directory already worked like that when I'm here in Florida. I can show the events in Florida only. The brother tell made a publication.
By one click.
I only go on the page of the events and the news
I
comes
don't
through.
know what that says. Give me the lyric.
Chris.
It's in French, I don't know what it says.
If you want in English, I can change.
I'm trying to get it to where we're on your topic and we'll talk about that later.
Okay, maybe we can discuss it later outside.
Yeah, in a hall.
Yeah,
All right.
we continue that way.
Okay, so the final brief now topic is to look at the larger teams. As I was saying, teams are growing, and we're obviously pushing more and more local teams to kind of expand. Ubuntu's becoming more popular on desktops being sold everywhere, and more local teams are going to kind of start springing up. So we need to put in place now for the future. So if in a year's time or 2 years' time we have 28 new approved LoCo teams arriving in one country, that there's some sort of mechanism like the States that it's broken down by state, because sending 250 CDs to one country that's the size of Australia or Canada isn't really ideal. Let's be fair. It's because you're going to spend all your time, or the volunteer is going to spend all their money sending a bunch of CDs to people miles away. So we need to put in place now so that Canonical can then plan in fact that if we break down Canada and Australia into their provinces and sectors or states, I'm going to say the same word, it's going to be called state, but you can put in the word province if you like. That we know in future there are 14 new states, and in that there could be 14 new approved LoCos, so that they could plan that in 2 years' time or 3 years' time 14 new approved LoCos could appear, and they have the facilities and the budgets to account for that, because at the moment they're going by this list. So they see the word Canada, they know there's one team, and that one team gets one box of CDs. And we've already agreed on the previous LoCo session that we're not going to do citywide LoCos, so that's already been mooted. So we now need to look at states or provinces, and also implement this in again for the LoCo directory.
Sorry, what?
So that it would then appear under there, we will look you up, and that it would appear under those countries as well. So that if we don't put it in place now, in 2 years later, we're reacting to a situation rather than being proactive now.
So right now, like in North America, I mean, all the states are listed in the US.
Yeah.
Is that going to be I mean, I guess the question is that a scaling problem when we start breaking up Australia and Canada? Or do we just keep doing what we're doing with the states? Just, they're all just listed.
It's not, I don't think it's about the states, I think it's about the other countries.
Well, no, I'm saying the US,
Oh,
it's already broken out.
Yeah.
It's just, they're
States
all
are
their
fine,
own.
we're leaving them.
No, I'm saying, why can't we just do the same thing? for
That's
the
what I'm
other ones?
planning. So
Okay.
that's
So
the
what
council.
do we have to do to plan that then? I mean,
We're just going to discuss and then we're going to announce it and then explain to the team that this is the reasoning why we're doing it. So I'm kind of just using the sessions to explain why we're doing it, the logic behind it, the reasoning behind it. Because there's no point in me saying, dear Canada, please break up into states, dear Australia, do the same thing. I need to explain the reasoning why.
I
Because
also think you need to be careful on the wording. Saying break up is not the right way to approach it. You know, please create new
Yeah.
teams, new
I'm
subteams.
conscientious of the time, but yes, I do fully appreciate it. I'm not going to go in and start conquering your country.
No,
But it's saying we're going to increase the support for your country in order to do that. You know,
But I
we
think
need
the
to-
Puppy's right. The Puppy's definitely right here. You need to do the right wording because you want them on your side. I do fully appreciate that. But just trying to, this is up for discussion, and because it's something that keeps being raised, and Canonical when they were doing shit, but it's the first question they ask is how many approved LoCo teams do you have? And I need to say that this could also improve. And obviously with the twinning up of teams and trying to increase the approval status, that more and more could increase. So I'd rather be proactive than reactive. I think that's the better way to be because Ubuntu has grown so much, and I can see that from 2 years ago from the amount of local teams that we had then to what we have now, and I'd rather kind of be think on time.
But this is about the ability for Canonical to provide support to those teams.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think it's a great idea. I like the idea, and I think that's the way to describe it, is we're going to be able to give you more support. The only question I can see being raised, and this is not my personal issue, I don't care, is when do we decide to have a country get more support? Is it based on the, you know, like let's say you're Ubuntu Canada and you've now reached 700 members, is that when we split you off, or, you know, how do we
size of the
determine?
country.
So just the size?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we've looked at this, the likes of, so UK is a perfect example, right? It encompasses, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's supposed to be Scotland, England and Wales,
But how many miles?
and Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland. So that's one team.
But how many, like is, when you just say a label, like how far is it up and down from the bottom of England to the top of Scotland?
Hundreds of miles.
Not thousands?
No.
All right.
But it still incurs a cost. So, you know, there's 60 million people in the country. We have certain pockets of population, you know,
Right.
and that's the same with every country. And if we send all the CDs to Joe, who lives in the southeast of the country, he has to get those to like people hundreds of miles away. And not only is there a cost incurred for him or for the individuals to get them, there's then the fact that it's 250 CDs divided by, you know, a bazillion people, which is unfair because it means, you know, one CD shared between,
Right.
you know.
And that's kind of what I was driving at. Well, so like Switzerland is probably too small geographically to be divided up. But then we've also got cases where you.
I don't think it should be quite so arbitrary as that. I think it should be seen to be activity. So for example, in the UK there's a lot of activity in the southeast, there's a bit in the Midlands, and there's some activity in Scotland. Do we really want to have a separate team for all of Scotland, or do we want to have a team for the Midlands as well, or should the southeast and Midlands be grouped? I don't think it's quite as clear-cut as drawing lines that are already on a geographic map, or looking at population densities in places. I'd like to see us looking at activity. So if there is a vast amount of activity in a particular area, then maybe that could be a candidate for being a sub-team of the country team.
And Pope's example, and I didn't mean to jump down there a while ago, but the way you word it is correct. To encourage teams, and I'm trying to explain that we're kind of looking out for you, and I guess the reason we've been elected to this point in the council is that we can see across the board. We're able to see it at a glance what's going to happen. We can see it from 2 years ago, the amount of teams it had. 2 years ago, we had no conference packs. We now have a conference pack A, a conference pack B. We now have a welcome pack.
It's worth noting actually that people do abuse this. There has been a team created, let's not go into any details, a team which is a team within another country team that then went off and applied for CDs despite having done zero, advocacy or work, and then saying, look, we've got all this stuff, and then actually does nothing.
So it's very
we have to be careful about how
I agree, and that was my only point, is that I want to make sure we have a clear message if people ask questions, because as you said, if we define it just geographically, then Switzerland doesn't get it. But we want it to not be that arbitrary, but if we say it's by activity, then...
Switzerland could well have two cities at opposite ends of the country that are so super active that it warrants splitting the country in half and having two...
But that same...
But not with that phrase.
That same thing, and I'm just going to use my state as an example, at this point it is not eligible for that. But if I had 300 people in Rochester active, which I don't, and then 300 people were active in New York City, and New York City has 9 million people, which exceeds the population of some countries we're dealing with, we're being told now that that's not going to be a case for going ahead and saying we should reallocate some of our resources. So Rochester's getting 250 and New York City's getting 250. That we're only going to do this in the case where we've got
Personally, I agree with you, and I'm disappointed that we're not going to go down to the city. I'm hopeful that carving up into regions might mean that in the future we can make a step towards cities.
Yeah, so I think it's baby steps. So maybe we didn't get cities now, but that doesn't mean necessarily in 2 years down the line we won't revisit the situation. But if we don't put these measures in now, then having to that then in 2 years' time, it would be crazy. And it is also worth noting, because like getting emails that Canonical didn't give us CDs. You shouldn't always have to rely on Canonical, to be honest. As Ubuntu France have done, they've done an amazing work of raising funds to actually burn their CDs and do it quite nicely. Because I understand the idea of not wanting to give it any a burned CD, I do. But equally, Canonical has limited resources, and if we don't also tell them that in the future there is a possible extra 30 teams coming ahead at the time, then it's kind of not being very nice to them as well. That's the way I look at it.
And there are other sources. I mean, we had I don't know what you want to call it, a distro burning service in Rochester. They've since moved to Michigan. But I mean, you can still contact other people and get pretty art put on CDs and go ahead and do it. So, and Vancouver apparently, they generate all their own CDs as well.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we have a good message to give people. And from my standpoint, being a local team leader, sometimes I get a person asking a question, and I just want to make sure that I'm on message with what you guys are saying. So
I think at this point that yes, somebody in the local team was actually asking for CDs. He's an unapproved team, and she went, "How many do you need?" He went, 20. She went, "I'll fire them off to you." And teams working together like that is a resource in itself. And sometimes we don't actually look to other teams to help us.
Yeah.
And hopefully with the twinning of the teams that we're going to do, we'll actually start buddying this up. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's been nice to air this out now, rather than this over IRC, because you know what, it's rather painful. So thank you.
Call Zaris and say, hey, you can put, donated by Zaris on the wall.